Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Celtic Way morning briefing for Thursday, the 30th of November. My name is Ryan McGinlay, and today I'm delighted to be joined by a special guest. I was going to say a special guest. We were here this time last week as well. You were kind of a bit of a regular on the morning briefing. I'm delighted to be joined by Tino from the Celtic Exchange. Tino, first of all, how are you doing this morning?
I'm good, Ryan. I hope you're doing well as well as we can be doing after another Champions League defeat. But you kind of get used to them, unfortunately, and I'm sure we'll get into that in much detail. But yeah, great to be back on. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been sort of dissecting the game over the past couple of days. We were on a couple of hours after the match to sort of talk about the way the game went and maybe some wider issues. Yesterday we did the same. It seemed as if it was like a sequel to that one. We were licking our wounds a wee bit after the game. Today we'll be talking about it and getting your opinion on the game, as well as some wider issues as well. But we'll try and get it in a more positive slant towards the end of today as we move on to the weekend against Craig Levine's St Johnstone team. But before we get started, as always, can I just thank MPH Group for sponsoring today's video and Navien Boilers as well for sponsoring the video. They are Scotland's award-winning family-run all-trade specialists covering all of mainland Scotland. Winter's rolling in, and if you're looking at giving your home heating system a boost, then MPH has an enticing Navien Boiler Winter Promotion just for you. When you opt for a Navien boiler installation through MPH, not only are you choosing top-tier efficiency, but you're also getting a free Navien Internet Controller. This little gadget can crank up your boiler's efficiency to an impressive 98%, and they're covering the first year's service, no added costs, which is a cherry on top. And if you're wondering why Navien, they're gunning for Product of the Year, the H&V News Awards, the Oscars of the heating world. To top it all off, the Navien ON range comes with an up to 12 years parts and labour warranty, which is some serious peace of mind. Big shout out to MPH as they're also nominated for Small Company of the Year at the same awards. Excellence recognises excellence, and MPH even offer flexible finance options. So gear up for the chill and consider making a smart move with MPH and Navien. So if you're looking for plumbing, heating, kitchen or bathroom works, then all the links are in the description. And we thank MPH Group, as always, for getting involved with the morning briefing. And before we go on to today's topics, once again, could I just direct everybody to the top and bottom of the screen? We're still running our Celtic Way Black Friday deal, £12 for 12 months of unrestricted quality Celtic coverage. On there today we've got an analysis piece from Alan Morrison looking at the wingers and their mixed fortunes, specifically in the Aberdeen game where Palmer played really well, as well as Yang, to where they struggled against Motherwell and then Lazio the other night. So if you're interested in that, looking at the analytics, as well as stats bomb pieces from myself, opinion pieces from Tony and myself, scouting pieces from Stuart Ross, which I'm sure will be coming in as we get to hopefully a busy January transfer window for Celtic, then please subscribe to the Celtic Way at www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. We can't continue to do these free videos, the pre and post match videos, without the support of you, the subscribers. So please get involved. www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. And yeah, thank you very much to everyone that's done so already. This is running until tomorrow evening, so please get involved. It's the best offer yet. So yeah, get involved and get subscribing. Thank you very much, guys. So Tino, I've not really got your opinion on Tuesday night's game. I know you've been doing a couple of podcasts, but we've been snowed under doing podcasts of our own after the game, so I've not managed to get round to the Celtic Exchange's viewpoint on the game. Maybe you might be repeating yourself just a tiny bit here, but I would just like your sort of response to Tuesday night, the way the game went, and maybe some of the reasons why you think that result transpired, because it was a game that Celtic were in for 80 odd minutes, and then the class shines through in the form of legendary striker Ciro Immobile. It was there wasn't a lot of chances for Celtic, but it was a game that Celtic were in, and in the last 10 minutes it fell apart.
Yeah, we put an article out yesterday, basically headline along the lines of the blame for Tuesday lies well away from Brendan Rodgers and the players that he had at his disposal. It's very much a recruitment issue. I think from Brendan Rodgers' point of view, or any manager, all you can do is work with the tools that you have, and he had a very limited squad to choose from. I think we had 3 centre-halves on the bench, just as an example, and I really think we were so weak in the full-back areas. Alistair Johnstone is struggling. That's maybe a separate conversation. Johnstone and Taylor struggled, and I think Yang up ahead of them and James Forrest up ahead of Taylor were pretty light options. And we know there's circumstances behind that. Palmer been suspended, Maeda suspended / injured, Abada still coming back from injury. So there's reasons why it was light. But even at a full strength Celtic, you'd have been in there against Lazio on Tuesday, knowing that you weren't quite of enough quality to go and properly compete. And I think that's exactly what Brendan Rodgers has been saying post-match Tuesday, and actually for the last number of weeks as well. And I think from his point of view, all he can do is set out the players in the way that he did. I think the general game plan was to still be in the game after 60, 70 minutes, and then at that point, maybe roll the dice and see what happens. He brings on Mikey Johnson on 60 minutes, who I thought done perfectly well. I think people are really quick to slate Mikey Johnson, and sometimes it's justified. People are still slating him on Tuesday night when he comes in and does well, so the boy can't win. He came in and at least added an injection of something, a bit of desire. The first thing he done was got the ball and made his way into the Lazio box, potentially for the first time all game. So he brought something to the game, and credit due for that. So Mikey comes in on 60 minutes and O comes on around about 69 minutes. And at that point, we effectively go 4-4-2 and really go for it. So from Brendan Rodgers' point of view, yes, it was a fairly, I don't want to say uninspiring performance up until then. I thought it was quite a mature performance without much happening. We didn't have much creativity. Nothing much was happening in the final third. But we were, as you say, well in the game at that point. And obviously we need to get something out of it. A draw is no use. So we then need to go for it at some point. And around about 70 minutes, we open up. We had that big chance with Yang's header. And I really think what might have been, football comes down to those big moments. And that was a big moment for him. I know he's a winger. And I know wingers aren't famed for their aerial ability. He also missed a bad header against Motherwell at the weekend, if we want to go back to that. But he's got to at least get it on target and work the goalie. He tried to be too cute. He's 6 yards out at a bit of an angle. You must go for goal, and who knows what could have happened. So from a Brendan Rodgers point of view, from the players that were playing, I think the players for the most part, limited as some of them may be, they gave their all, and it's all you can ask. But there's a serious lack of quality there. So yeah, I'm sure we'll discuss this, here and beyond. But it's off the park. It's the summer recruitment. It's 9 players that come in the summer, of which on the night only 2 play, Bernardo and Yang. And I would argue if Hatate and Maeda were fit, for example, they wouldn't have been anywhere near it. And Lewis Palmer, of course, suspended. He would have played. So that's a genuine 1 out of 9 summer signing that would have played. And I made that comment in the article that I put out. 1 out of 9 is not good enough. The rest are all maybe players. We don't see Kwon at all. Further back, Iwata. There's a serious recruitment issue all of a sudden at Celtic, and it's a real issue.
Yeah, and it's an issue that seems to have come about. I know Celtic's recruitment has been hit and miss over the years. Celtic had that really good spell under Ange Postecoglou where it felt as if, by necessity, they had to bring 8, 9 to 10 players in because there was a rebuild going on or a mini rebuild happening. There was some players that stayed on. But it seemed as if all of those players that came in, your Starfelts, your Juranovic, Yakimakis, after a spell, after a bit of a barren spell, he was really good in the second half of the season. Then you get your Kyogos, your Maedas, Hatate. Every transfer seemed to work, and it was working when maybe Ange Postecoglou was playing the de facto director of football sort of role as well. He was bringing in these players that he knew would fit his system, and everything seemed to be working well with regard to that. You don't want to put the blame firmly on one person, but you just look at the players that have came in, specifically since Mark Lawwell came into his job role as the head of recruitment at Celtic, or the head of development, or his job title. There was a lot of talk, and I remember that Celtic never announced that directly to their social media. They hid it away on their website. They didn't want to disclose that it was a Lawwell that was getting the recruitment job. But since Lawwell's come in, Mark Lawwell, there has been a couple of good signings. Specifically, you look at the permanent deals of Jota and Carter Vickers. I don't want to directly attribute them to him because they were already in the first season. It was just very much a notion of getting them on permanent deals. But you've got to look at some of the players that have been brought in over the past 2 years that are simply just not making the required impact. I've actually got the list of them in front of me. There was a good tweet by Kieran Celtic, who's been on Twitter for a number of years, just looking at some of the players that have been brought in. In some ways, it's too early to judge some players like Marco Tilio, who have been injured for so long and have only played 3 minutes. But there's some decent sized transfers that just are not making an impact whatsoever. Even from the first season, if you look at players that aren't even at the club anymore, Oliver Abildgaard, that was a loan, a temporary suspension of his contract due to the conflict in Russia. got Yuki Kobayashi that was brought in, Siegrist, who hasn't really kicked a ball for Celtic, Haksabanovic, who flattered to deceive. I think the big one for me, and the big omission from the Champions League squad when it was announced was Bernabe, who Celtic signed for 3.75 million, who can't get into a Champions League squad. I think that's an absolutely damning indictment of the recruitment over the past couple of years. What's your makings on this? Because it seems from that list that there's very, very few players that have properly kicked on, apart from Carter Vickers and Jota, who are signed permanently.
Yeah, I mean, if you're bringing in guys for, I don't know, 500 grand, 750,000 pounds and taking a bit of a gamble, that's fine. You mentioned Bernabe, 3.5 million, 3.75 million.
Just under 4.
Mike Navrocki, 4.3, not even in the Champions League squad. Kwon, 1 million down the drain. Various other examples, and you're right in what you're saying in terms of, I don't think any of us want to make this an attack on Mark Lawwell as an individual, or some one person specifically. It's obviously a collective as part of the recruitment team, but he carries the can because he has a big role. Is it head of scouting and recruitment? Is that his job?
I'll look his actual job title up just now.
So that is ultimately his responsibility, and I'm sure Mark Lawwell's paid very well for what he does, and potentially rightfully so. It's a big job, but then you look at the track record, and you're judged on who you bring in and how they succeed or not. I think I seen the tweet from Kieran Celtic United. It's 17 players he's brought in and listed the 17 players, and very hard to pick out any genuine successes there. When Ange came in, and after he got his first window or two out the road, you were looking at his numbers and saying, do you know what? I think at the time I remember saying Ange had brought in about 9 players and about 7 had been a success and hit the ground running, meaning 2 failures. This time around, it's the opposite. You've maybe got, I'm pushing the boy to say 2 successes. You've got Louis Palmer. You can maybe pick one other. I'm not sure who that might be out. The others, Navrocki might come good, Tillio might come good. But generally speaking, instead of 7 successes and 2 failures, we've got 2 successes and 7 probable failures at this moment in time. And you mentioned how Celtic announced Mark Lawwell as well. That was a real issue for us, a concern for us, and we discussed it on the show, because if Celtic have scoured the globe, scoured Europe at least, looking for this head of recruitment who's the best man for the job, it's a hell of a coincidence that it just happens to be the former CEO's son. It really is. If Celtic talked when Don Mackay came in about being best in class across the board, not just on the football department, behind the scenes, sports science, retail, everything the club does. So they've scoured the market for the best potential head of recruitment, and it just happens to be CEO Peter Lawwell's son. Okay, we'll go for that. If Celtic genuinely believe that and are proud to make that announcement and think, what a coup, what a catch, we've managed to get this fella in the door, why did they hide it on social media? Why did they make it almost a PS to another news story? I mentioned the fact that in the announcement of Mark Lawwell, Celtic put out a very short news story, and it was littered with glowing quotes from Ange Postecoglou. The picture they used was not one of Mark Lawwell, it was a picture of Ange Postecoglou, because at the time Ange could do no wrong, and they thought, I know what we'll do, we'll not put Mark front and centre because of the nepotism and the questions we'll get, we'll just make it Ange because everyone loves Ange and nobody will touch it, and that'll disappear in the next couple of days. You could call it smart PR, you could call it sneaky PR, I'd go with the latter. So that just doesn't sit right, and ultimately when it bears out then that not only is it Peter Lawwell's son, it's the fact that he's not doing a good job, or it certainly doesn't look like that, it then really starts to jar with folks. So there's a lot wrong with it. There's a lot that doesn't sit well. But moving beyond that, recruitment in general, I just think that Brendan Rodgers came in at a time where all of a sudden another mini overhaul was needed, given that Jota had moved on and Giacomak, as you mentioned, Juranovic, Aaron Moy retires, Tom Rogic retires. There's a lot of guys that we've not really replaced, and listen, a lot of high quality. Tom Rogic, a real standout of a player, not easy to replace, but I think we're even close to replacing Tom Rogic or that kind of player. Some thought Matt O'Reilly might be the guy, but he's not the same type of footballer. So Brendan Rodgers very quickly became apparent that although he was in time for the summer window, he was getting fed a lot of nonsense in terms of the players that he was being given. You'll have seen his comments. There was a couple of clips doing the rounds post-match. He's in a precarious position where he doesn't want to throw players under a bus, and I don't think he's doing that, but it's also fair as Celtic manager at a club where the standards are high, or should be high, he's allowed to say that the quality isn't there. Now, somebody says, well, that's not great for the current players. Well, there's a challenge. Go and be better. Go and work harder. Go and improve your game. go and bring more to the party, because unfortunately, if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be at Celtic, and that's just life. Well, listen, we all want to play for Celtic. We all wanted to do so as a kid, but we weren't good enough. And that's just the way things work out. So I think the players need to take it on the chin, do what they can do to get better and prove that they can play a part. But the manager absolutely has the right, as manager of Celtic, with £72 million in the bank and more to come, to demand better quality in January. 100%.
Yeah, it's a precarious position for Brendan Rodgers to be in it, but also kind of calls into question, as we call into question with the title, should Celtic's recent recruitment be called into question? It's a bit of a weird one, because Brendan Rodgers came back. There was a lot of bridges that were burned that were suddenly rebuilt because he came back to the club. All of a sudden you're like, well, why did Brendan Rodgers come back to the club if nothing has changed in that regard with the recruitment? I understand why it was probably a nostalgic reason that he came back, was because he had such a good time with the club the first time. He wanted to continue on with his success, but he would have thought that there had been a change. He said he was content with the way the scouting system was. I don't think he can be content with the scouting system the way it's going just now, just given the amount of misses that they've had, especially that summer there. You talk about Kwon. Kwon hasn't even made his competitive debut for the club yet. It's not great at all. Tillio's made 3-4 minutes of an appearance off the bench against Motherwell at home. I thought he looked positive in the couple of times that he came onto the ball, but he's not going to be pushing for a first team spot every single week at the moment. He's definitely a development player. You'd say right now with regard to Yang, he's a development player too. You don't want to call too many players projects, but it seems like the majority of them are. And you're flinging projects into the deep end at the Stadio Olimpico and Lazio, and I think you've seen Yang's not immaturity, but lack of experience at that level. And I think the header against Motherwell was still playing on his mind. That was why he tried to play it back to Kyogo, because I still think he's thinking about that miss. He knows he should have scored against Motherwell, and he's like, I don't want to do that again. So, and I don't want to say that he shirked his responsibility with regard to giving it to Kyogo. He's trying to pick out his man, pick out his striker, a striker that's been starved of delivery, but he probably makes the wrong decision. Watching a lot of the Champions League goals last night, a lot of them hit off the goalkeeper and go in the back of the net. You've got to take that opportunity. It might not look like the most aesthetically pleasing goal, but if you hit the goalkeeper at close range, then there is a chance of it deflecting off of him and going into the back of the net. All of a sudden, it's a completely different game at 1-0. Yeah. So yeah, it seems to be projects all over, that P word that we seem to be using every morning on this podcast. Plenty of projects, and the one word that Brendan Rodgers is using constantly is quality. And it seems as if those project players don't have the quality yet to make the difference, especially in Europe, and that's why January has to be very, very important, doesn't it? Difficult window, but there has to be business done in January.
Yeah. I mean, it's become a cliche that it's a difficult window, and I think some clubs, and definitely our own, use it as something to hide behind. I've no doubt it's more challenging. It's mid-season, teams potentially don't want to lose players, but there's business to be done, and there's effective business that can be done. We've seen that time when, Matt O'Reilly was a January signing, Rio Hitati was a January signing, Daisen Maeda was a January signing, so was Ideguchi. So that kind of goes against my argument, but the bottom line is you can get quality in, you just need to work harder, and I'm sure Celtic as a club have all the tools and resources and contacts to go and find these players. So yeah, it's harder, but work harder, and we'll see what we get, because to send Brendan Rodgers into a Champions League game with some of those projects that we've mentioned is just, you are setting him up for failure. And we speculated, we'd done our post-match, and emotions were running fairly high, but I'd like to think it was fairly balanced. We looked more at the bigger picture than actually at the game itself as such.
We did as well.
And I think, there is an opportunity there. Celtic were drawn in I would say not a winnable group, but a group that you could definitely challenge in. And the frustration is, for the most part, out with the Atletico game away from home, Celtic did compete, even as recently as Tuesday night, we did compete in spells. But when they bring on Ciro Immobile and we bring on O, that is the glaring contrast. And I'm not saying we go and buy someone of his ilk. He's a very experienced, scored something like 200 goals for Lazio, breaking all sorts of records. Very talented, very high level, very much a Champions League striker. So we can't go at that level. We appreciate that. But can we go somewhere between him and Kyogo? Can we push the boat out? And I know And Brendan Rodgers says that spending 10, 12 million doesn't guarantee success either. It certainly gives you a hell of a bigger chance of success. And I just think Celtic need to, if nothing changes, right? If we keep doing what we're doing, we'll keep getting what we're getting. We'll keep getting into Champions League groups. We'll keep getting excited about it, and we'll get hammered again. And folks like you and I will come back on here on a Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, and speak about the same things all over again. And actually, there's a real danger at Celtic of fans starting to show apathy towards that. And apathy is worse than anger. You know, if fans are angry and they're frustrated and they want change to happen, they'll aggravate for changing different things, but they'll still be there. If apathy kicks in, you just stop going and you just stop caring. And that's when it will really start to affect the club. Now, that would have to happen en masse. And I know Celtic have got thousands in a waiting list for season tickets and all that kind of stuff. But you see very quickly, and I don't want to pin Ronnie Dyler, but when Ronnie Dyler came in, Celtic had to block out a section of the Lisbon Lions stand, top tier, because X thousand fans just weren't turning up in their numbers. It can happen, and there's an example in pretty recent history of it happening. So it is possible. And then, and potentially only then, would the board start to take action. Now's the time to take action. Take action while you've still got a solid, loyal, reliable fan base, and actually try and do something for them for once in modern history.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get on to talk about more about, and we'll talk more about this discussion as well as maybe bring up some points in the comments section. We do have a special giveaway on the Celtic Way this morning. We have got 2 tickets for Graham Spears Even with Neil Lennon, which is obviously hosted by Graham Spears at Ormore on the 5th of December. I'll just read the wee tagline. Neil Lennon is a legend of Celtic FC, a player who won countless trophies under Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan, and then a Celtic manager who lifted 5 trophies on the bounce, including the 2019-2020 treble. Lennon is a Celtic rarity, a treble winner both as a player and manager. His coaching career has also taken him to England and Cyprus as well as Hibs. Come and enjoy this evening on a conversation hosted by Graham Spears, in which Lennon reflects on his career highs and lows and also participates in an audience Q&A. Now, this is happening on the 5th of December, so next week. To be in with a chance of winning one of these tickets, and it's a pair of tickets rather. So if you're looking for a pair of tickets, then in the comment section, if you could please, and if you are available on the 5th of December, obviously please don't participate if you cannot make that date. But if you can make that date, then please put in the number that Neil Lennon made famous at Celtic, or the number that he used whilst he was at Celtic, both as a player and as a captain. If you get the right answer, we will put your name up, and at the end of the show we'll say who wins the competition and who gets those double tickets to the Ormore on the 5th of December. I'm just trying to think of when the 5th of December is. It was the 1st of December, so that'll be Tuesday. So if you are interested, then please put the number in the comments section. Just going back to what we were talking about, Tino, with regard to the transfer. Just this season, you look at some of the players that have been brought in, Kwon, Tilio, that they really haven't made an impact whatsoever. And I don't want to go over old ground far too much, because we have been talking about these players that haven't been making an impact. Down to the low numbers of players that have made an impact. It's easy to go back the way and look at the players that have not made a positive impact since coming in, or hardly any impact whatsoever, if at all. Just in January, now I know we were saying that can be maybe used as an excuse by certain teams for not bringing in players or not recruiting players in January. Where are the positions that you would say need strengthened the most in January? If you were to pick a couple of positions, where would they be? Would you go in left back in the goalkeeping position, which was so clearly highlighted in the Motherwell game with the equaliser? Or are there other positions? Do you get another striker in? Obviously, with the Asia Cup looming large, depends if Celtic's players get called up, to be honest. But if they do, then Celtic will be missing quite a few players in that regard, if they are fit, of course. Looking at those positions that I've mentioned, or a position that maybe I haven't mentioned, is there one of those areas that Celtic need to? Where do you think that Celtic need to improve?
Yeah, I mean, we've been saying it all season, and I think most folk have been saying goalkeeper, left back, striker. That's kind of the easy trio to mention. I don't think Joe Hart's the reason we don't beat Lazio, for example, though. I think just a lack of cutting edge is the most glaring situation. And again, I do appreciate some of the creatives were missing. The Louis Palmer. Louis Palmer was a big loss to us the other night. He could have made a difference. Maeda, not a creative in the natural sense of the word, but he's certainly effective and he causes problems and he defends from the front. But I do think, and I really don't like to keep banging on about it, I think Greg Taylor's really out his depth at this moment in time, particularly at Champions League level, but he's also not covering himself in glory domestically. He's having some decent games, and he should be more than capable now at his age and experience to play fairly well, in Scotland. I think it's really highlighted when he goes into Europe. I actually think it's his physicality as much as anything that's costing him. And as I say, you're who you are as a person. Your height is your height. You can work all day long. You can't improve on your height. He could, build up a wee bit physically, but he's just getting out-muscled. And he's struggling time after time against any sort of decent wingers. I also think, if we want to add balance to it, Alistair Johnstone is going back the way for me. He was a January signing, wasn't he? He came in and hit the ground running, looked like a great find, very quickly looked like somebody who potentially was even going to be an upgrade in Juranovic. Folks were very excited about him. And this season's his first spell in Europe, and he's really struggled as well. So I think he's more than capable domestically, although a bit off form there as well. But he's all of a sudden struggling domestically, so in Europe, sorry. So you could argue that we're light in the fullback areas. We miss a creative. We didn't replace Tom Rodgers. Is there a 10 there? Is Louis Palmer potentially the 10? Rodgers certainly hasn't used him in that way. And there's undoubtedly the need for a striker. We know the Asian Cup's coming up January, February. We'll be missing Kyogo and potentially Maeda if he's fit enough to travel to that one. But even Asian Cup aside, we need a viable alternative up front. Kyogo ran his heart out, as he always does on Tuesday. You might remember the mistake he made, which led to the first goal. He had the ball in a good area, maybe 30 yards from goal. There was a decent option on his left-hand side. He couldn't get the ball at his feet. The legs were gone. Lazio break, and it's 1-0. So I'm not blaming Kyogo for the goal. He gave his all. But had we a decent alternative to Kyogo, someone we could have brought in, maybe around about 60 minutes as a replacement, and I mean a viable replacement, not who's still very much a project player, as we mentioned. If we had a decent striker, that would have potentially, again, it's all potential, isn't it? We never know, but that could have made a difference. So, anyone I've missed? Goalie, fullback, striker, number 10.
Seems like a new team almost.
I think there's requirements across the board. That's the thing, and there's guys who are doing a decent job. But actually, if you look at Celtic's full 32-man squad, and 32 is a crazy number for any club, that's mismanagement as well, how we've ended up with that. And you can't blame the manager for that. It's not his job to get players out the door that are surplus to requirements. So somebody's not done that job well as well. But you look across the 32-man squad, it might be easier and quicker to say, of those 32 guys, who would you genuinely keep around? Who's Champions League quality? Is it Matt O'Reilly? Is it Carter Vickers? Is it Kyogo? Is there many more? Genuinely, maybe Louis Palmer. I'm not.
Because the thing is, you look at individual positions as well, and you're thinking, can you improve further on those positions, even if there are good players there? Celtic should always be, in my opinion anyway, striving for the best quality players in every single position. And, even if there are players that are comfortable in their own position, you want players to be bringing in to sort of move that needle and improve the squad as a whole and challenge for positions. It seems, and there are really good players in some positions, but they're comfortable. They know that they're going to play in every single game, even though there are other options there, which shows you that the options that are waiting on standby just aren't good enough to challenge. And those, always had a couple of chances to sort of not dismantle Kyogo or displace Kyogo off the starting lineup, but to give Kyogo a rest. And in some games, he's shown that he does have something, but in other games, as a striker, you're going to get judged on goals, and he scores in spurts, and then in some games he doesn't score at all. Yeah. So he's very up and down. But you could say the same for Kyogo, because he's hardly getting any service as well. So is that a problem with the system, or is it a problem with the individual? I don't know if it's maybe somewhere in between. But in the defence, there's options, but they're not getting game time due to Liam Scales. That might change going into the weekend, because I thought Scales had a pretty poor game against Lazio. He bullied off the ball for the second goal from Immobile. I think that's just it's just smart from Immobile. I know he was calling for a foul. but as a striker, if you can get the better of your man in a physical sense, he does it in a way that, you can't really give him a foul for it, but he out-muscles him in the air, sort of halfway in the air, and then it's a great finish by the striker. In my Stats Bomb report yesterday, I said that sometimes you've just got to applaud a really, really good player in Immobile, and that was the difference on the night. But
yeah,
Scales, I thought, struggled against Lazio, to be honest.
Yeah, Liam Scales v Ciro Immobile ended up the way that Liam Scales v Ciro Immobile should have ended up. Immobile's top level striker. Scales he's not a young man anymore. He's 25, I think, but unfortunately, he still falls into development. Last season, he was playing for Aberdeen against run-of-the-mill Scottish Premiership teams. Now he's in the Olympic Stadium. Now he's at the Metropolitano Stadium playing against Atletico and De Kuip, which is Feyenoord Stadium. He's playing in big arenas against big players. That is, listen, an amazing experience, and Liam Scales wouldn't change it for the world, but it's also a hell of a leap. You've gone from Aberdeen at home to St Johnstone, and other games of that ilk was his kind of bread and butter last season, and all of a sudden he's now thrown into these environments, and not only the pressure of playing against these players, just the pressure of representing Celtic, particularly as a young man from Ireland who grew up a Celtic fan as well. There's huge pressure on Liam Scales, and I think he's performed admirably. I'm not convinced that he's the man moving forward. You talked, Brian, about moving the needle and always needing or looking to improve in positions. I think with all respect, we've got to improve on Liam Scales as well, who's been perfectly good, and he's shown up really well, and credit to him, as I say, but we need to do better than that. And I don't want to come in here and just do the couple of nights after another defeat, throw everybody under the bus and say, well, everything's murder and we need to start again. But genuinely, when I was thinking there of the genuine Champions League players that we should keep around, it's Carter Vickers, it's Hatate, O'Reilly, Palmer, maybe Callum McGregor, and maybe there's a conversation there. I think it's still Kyogo. Kyogo has proven that if you give him the service, he'll score. He managed to score against Atletico and Lazio, both at home. He can score at this level. And that aside, very genuinely, I'm not sure if there's a high level of quality across the board. We don't know yet about Navroki, Tilio, Lagerbielka, one or two others. But in terms of genuine quality, there's half a dozen at most there.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't know how good the quality of those players are, because some of them have been injured, some of them haven't been included in the Champions League squad. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting place, especially in the centre of defence. 2 wee seconds. Sorry, I've just been sorting something off screen as well. You've got so many different
busy man
to go with to spin. My mum's saying spin. But yeah, in terms of the recruitment does have to be better, especially for this for the January transfer window and going into the summer window as well.
Sorry to interrupt, but I was just going to ask, where do you see the priorities? Obviously, I've kind of banged on there a wee bit and get carried away potentially, but where do you see the gaps? Who would you like to bring in January as priority?
I think the two main positions that we're in the summer as well, that the two really problem areas were at left back and in goalkeeping position. I said that they were a problem in the summer. I still maintain that. You look at, I remember putting out a tweet and I've harped back to it saying, the balance sheet looks great, but at the same time, these balance sheets and these profits can't play at left back and goalkeeper. You've got to spend that money in order to make the team better. I think Greg Taylor's been struggling. It's now with these two players, at least with Alistair Johnstone, that he's a capable pair of hands or feet in the domestic action. But I think Taylor and Joe Hart have been struggling in some games as well, domestically too. So when that form, the European form, maybe their struggles in Europe, then goes into the form domestically, then it's a bit of an issue. And Celtic's bread and butter is domestically. And if that is getting affected by players, then, I think those areas need to be strengthened. I think they're the emergency positions that need to be strengthened, but I also think in other areas too. They need another striker. I think they probably need an imposing striker. O's trying to be a mix between Kyogo and Giakoumakis. I don't think he's the quality of either of them just yet, although I was a fan of O when he came into the club. I just think his goal record isn't much to shout about. He got those couple of goals against Aberdeen, but Aberdeen were woeful in that game, and he preyed upon a team that were really, really struggling away from home. I think they need a striker, whether that be on loan with an option to buy, and a sort of Edward ilk that they can check him out for 6 months, do the business, and then sign him on for a premium fee. If that avenue's there, then I think Celtic should take it. But they need a second option for Kyogo. Kyogo can't carry the load for the whole game. It's got to be Kyogo and somebody else, the two of them fighting, because Kyogo might have got too comfortable himself, and if that's the case, then that can bring down levels too.
I think you've seen, we talk about this frequently, the fact that any footballer raises his game when there's genuine competition in their position. The big example has become cliche is Paddy Roberts putting pressure on James Forrest at that time, and it brought out the best of James Forrest, who had been maybe getting a wee bit complacent, knowing that he was going to start every game, for example. Even a more recent example might be the fact that Ange Postecoglou at times would give Giakoumakis the shout over Kyogo. Not often, but at times. So Kyogo knew that if he wasn't doing it, Giakoumakis was waiting in the wings to get a start. I think, regardless who Celtic are playing at any given time just now, Champions League, Cup games, League games, whatever, if it's any sort of notable game Kyogo starts, there's not even a question that O would start a game ahead of Kyogo at this moment in time. Could you imagine if O had started in Lazio ahead of Kyogo? It just wouldn't happen. There's no genuine alternative up front for Celtic right now. That's not good for the club as a whole. Certainly not good for Kyogo the individual, because whether it's subconsciously or otherwise, I know he's got a good attitude to his football, but it becomes human nature to get complacent when you know that regardless how good you are or not, regardless how many goals you've scored recently or not, you're always going to play. That's not good for anybody. So I think that's just one example, and that's happening across the park. Greg Taylor can have as bad a game as he wants. He will start every single time at left back, particularly in Europe where Bernabei's not even in the squad. So again, there's not really a viable alternative. There's a suggestion you could put Scales to left back. It would be quite a move now, given that we've never done it. So Greg Taylor's assured of his game. 6 Champions League games is in the bag for Greg Taylor. Great for him, not great for Celtic at all.
Yeah, the fact that he's so comfortable in that position indicates a problem, because the second option isn't even, there should be at least two options in every single position. Obviously, different positions have more options, such as goalkeeper and centre back. If there's two midfielders, 3 midfielders, so there'll be more and more options. But left back, that's a designated spot. You need to have at least 2 players that can play in that position. Don't think Scales has even been fancied as a left back at all. Last time he played as a left back for Celtic was under Ange Postecoglou, and even then that was in fleeting appearances, some cup games. Remember he played there up in Tannadice as well. I was at that game when he scored the goal from out wide. It was a screamer. Yeah. But yeah, the second option, your high profile spending, your high profile signing, and Alexandro Bernabei can't even get into the Champions League squad. Now, it should be easy for a player that's worth 4 or 5 million, or at least that's how much Celtic paid for him, just under 4 million, to get into a Champions League squad. Celtic cannot afford to have development players that are not available. Unfortunately for Bernabei, I think he's a liability defensively. I don't think he's got a defensive bone in his body. He looks like a bit of a failed winger that's been...
all kidding aside, who's scouted Bernabei? Who's looked at him and thought he's going to do a job for us defensively and offensively at Champions League level at some point in the near future? Somebody's watched him playing in a number of games and thought he's the man. And I think you're right. He potentially is a failed winger. I believe he played there earlier in his career, but he's not there now. He's now a left back. That's what his agent will be pitching him as, and that's where he played. Was it Lanús was his club in Argentina?
Yep.
And regardless, somebody's had a look at him and thought he's good enough, and also saw fit to pay nearly £4 million for him. That looks more outrageous by the passing week. The fact that he can't even get in for the domestic game, so it's not like we're keeping Greg Taylor fresh for Europe and we're using Bernabei against the rest of the Scottish Premiership sides. He can't even get a game against them, save for a cameo that he made against Aberdeen a couple of weeks ago or a few weeks ago. So that's... And listen, there's loads of Bernabeis throughout the squad. There's loads of examples like that where, whether it's in person or through software and technology, people at Celtic have had eyes on this individual and thought he'll come and do a good job. And I understand recruitment, it's not an exact science. There's never 100% success rate with recruitment. we talk often about Alex Ferguson's great saying that if you get 1 and 2 right, you're doing a good job. I would say with technology and advances and softwares and programs that scouts and recruitment teams use, you probably should be getting better than 1 and 2 actually at this moment in time. But Celtic, as I say, 11% success rate at the moment, 1 out of 9 from the summer signings, and there's a bigger picture if you want to look back even further. So it's ultimately what it comes down to. Even though I'm a huge fan of Brendan Rodgers, really talented coach, but actually, generally speaking, in football, the teams with the best players win. Almost regardless of the coach. You need to have a coach of a certain ilk, a certain standard. But if you've got more good players than not, if you recruit effectively and bring in the right guys, you'll win more games. I know that sounds so basic, and I'm not meaning to simplify the whole thing, but if you can pluck out some key players in key areas, you'll go and reap the benefits of it. And Celtic are failing to do so. So you can point the finger at any number of folk and we had a laugh. Is it Green Brigade's fault at the weekend? Is it Rod Stewart's fault? Is it Hoopy's fault? Is it Peter Lawwell's fault? Whoever. It's the recruitment team. If you bring in better players, you do better. You perform better against teams like Motherwell and teams like Lazio. And that's where Celtic have failed, bottom line.
Yeah. With regard to who scouted Burnaby, it was I remember in the articles near enough round about the time that Mark Lawwell was getting touted for that job, that South America was his speciality. That was the area one of the areas that he looked upon when identifying players. You look at some of the other players that he would have brought in with regard to South America. Another player that Celtic were linked with, quite a few players that Celtic were linked with. Vinicius Souza, who's currently at Sheffield United. Douglas Luiz, I remember, was linked. He's now at Aston Villa. I remember the picture of him getting used when he was playing for Man City. He had an afro. He doesn't have an afro anymore, but he's running things for Aston Villa in a top 6 side just now in the Premier League. So it shows that it can be a mixed bag. It can be a mixed bag anywhere when you're identifying players in those environments. But I think maybe a couple of eye tests would have been good with regard to watching Burnaby, watching him in person, identifying him. Maybe clips did make him look better than what he was, but at the moment he's looking like a bit of a limited footballer who is pacey on the ball, a bit pacey because of his diminutive height, but defensively, I don't think he's got a defensive bone in his body, unfortunately.
Well, I talk about Greg Taylor struggling because of the physicality, right? Greg Taylor's a footballer of a reasonable standard. He's a decent footballer. He's good in the ball. He's got talent.
That last season.
You don't make it to Celtic without talent. So, I want to be fair to Greg Taylor. I think he's all heart, by the way. He gives his absolute all. And he strives to give his best at every opportunity. And I'm sure he works hard behind the scenes. So I'm not slating him at all as an individual or a professional. A good pro who's trying to get the best out of his game. But the physicality is a huge part of the modern game, particularly in Europe. And we know that Greg Taylor's struggling with that. And then we look around and we get to South America and we see Burnaby. And again, somebody's went, okay, he's got a decent pass in him. He's got this. He's got a bit of pace. What about his physicality? Because he don't got that either. He's 5 foot something or other. When he spikes his hair, he adds a wee bit of height to it and stuff like that.
He's 5'4".
5'4"?
Mm-hmm. Apparently so. That's the figure that was going about. Could be 5'5", 5'6". As you said, when he spikes his hair up, I know he's been putting a bit of the Alberto Balsam gel in his hair for that reason.
Whatever he is, he's not 6 foot with broad shoulders, put it that way. And I think, if Celtic have been really looking at how do you progress in Champions League, you need, physically imposing players, certainly in key positions. You might get away with a diminutive striker or a winger or whatever. Certainly across your back line, you want big, powerful guys. Yes, you've got to play first and foremost, or got to be able to play, but you need to have a physicality to deal with the challenge that Europe brings. And as I say, Celtic have been looking for a viable alternative to Greg Taylor for some time, by the way. Ball and goalie was deemed the alternative at one point. Hatem El Hamed was played at left back at different times. Juranovic was played at left back instead of him at times. I think Callum McGregor gets slotted in at left back at some point at Ibrox. I'm sure there's all sorts of alternatives to Greg Taylor that Celtic have tried, but ultimately they failed to replace him. So we've just gone back to Greg Taylor and just went, we'll just go with him then, and that'll be good enough. It's not good enough. And the latest iteration is Alessandro Burnaby, who clearly looks like he's going to be a waste of £3.75 million. And I don't think you can develop him enough to be a good European left back or a European level left back. So you just need to punt him, and you're not going to make a profit on that. So you're going to lose money and waste everybody's time. So again, it's just another glaring error by the recruitment team.
Yeah, before we get into the last segment of the show, I just want to reiterate that we do have 2 tickets available to an evening with Neil Lennon at the Moor. If you are interested, I know I did say the one about the number, and I think it was only 1 or 2 people that got involved. If you are interested in the ticket for next Tuesday, please type in the comments section ticket, and we'll pick out a person at random to get that pair of tickets for Neil Lennon at the Moor next Tuesday, which is Tuesday the 5th of December. Should be a good night, full of Q&As, interviews, talking about some big moments, probably the highs and lows of his Celtic career, both as a player and a manager, talking about Seville, probably talking about the 2020-21 season, as well as winning the treble, both as a player and a manager. If you are interested, then please type in ticket into the comments, and we'll pick out a random winner to get those tickets. So just looking on to the weekend, because I know that we've been talking about recruitment and the problems with recruitment and the lack of quality players that have been brought in as a result of that. We go to McDermott Park on Sunday against St Johnstone, who have been kind of revitalised just a tad under their new manager, and Craig Levine, a well-drilled operator, an operator that's been around the block. I know he's not been managing for the past couple of years. He's fancied himself more as a pundit than a manager in the past couple of years. But he's back in the fray, replacing McLean in the hot seat at McDermott Park. What are you expecting from that at the weekend? McDermott Park as a grass surface, proper grass. So there won't be any plastic issues to worry about in that regard. But what are you expecting from the weekend?
I think with Craig Levine, they've made what is probably a fairly uninspiring choice, but a fairly safe choice. He will most likely keep them safe, I would expect. He's a very experienced operator. He's not everybody's cup of tea for a variety of reasons, and he'll always be haunted by the 4-6-0 formation that he played for Scotland that time, whenever that was. So he's a pragmatic manager in the truest sense of the word, and he will most likely park the bus. There's no getting away from that. A point's a huge reward for a club like St Johnstone against somebody like Celtic. So I don't expect you'll see much by way of creativity. You might see a 4-5-1 with the one dropping very deep into the midfield, when Celtic are in possession. So it's going to be another one of those games. And bizarrely, Celtic have struggled more at home than away this season. It was turgid against Motherwell, wasn't it? And against St Johnstone, I suppose we've got to remember that they've already taken a point off us at a time where they weren't playing particularly well. So that's a challenge for us, and they'll take confidence from the fact that they've kept us at bay before. They'll feel more confident about it away from home. But I actually think, for whatever reason, Celtic have been playing with a bit of freedom away from home. We've picked up big points on the road at Ibrox and Pittodrie and Tynecastle and all these kind of places, albeit they'll come out a bit more than St Johnstone ever would. So I don't know. We could be set for another frustrating day. Is it a 12 kickoff, a noon kickoff? I wonder, is this the time where Brendan Rodgers takes the opportunity to freshen things up? Now, there'll be players that he could introduce that might not be as good as some of the ones that have been playing, but they'll come in very motivated to go and make an impact. Whether it's, is Tilio a shout? I don't know. I don't know how his development's come along. Palmer would be back. Palmer gives you an injection of quality. Mm-hmm. Is it time to put Navrocki in for Scales? Is there much else we can do?
If he's fit, I think he's got to play now. He's got to start playing. You've got to look to, and as much as that's, and Scales has started the last 15, 16 games on the bounce, and he's done so well. And I remember talking about the fact that he could be out of contract in the summer. A wee Google search told me that he's still got another year left on his deal after this season, so there isn't any rush. As much as he probably deserves a new deal, an extended deal, there isn't any rush to give him that at this moment in time. I'd quite like Celtic to roll the dice a bit and let's see what Navrowski can do, because I didn't think he put a foot wrong until he got injured. So
if not now, when? When are you going to give him the opportunity? Do you wait to the end of the season? When it's dead rubbers or whatever. I think if you pay 4.3 million for a guy and he's the biggest outlay we made in the summer, you've got to give him a chance at some point. And sentimentality needs to go out the window. I think Ange was good at saying you won't get games just because you're about to reach a milestone, or we feel sorry for you, or the fans really want it or whatever, you make the right calls at the right times with the right personnel. And I think now, potentially, after a tough night in Rome as well, might be the time to give Navrocki a chance. And I wouldn't be against that at all. So I'd like to see it. I'd love to ask you a question. There's a headline doing the rounds. I'm sure you've seen it. I can't quite believe it. But there's a suggestion that AC Milan are going to offer somewhere between 7 and 8 million in January for David Turnbull. You buying that?
I know I've got it on pretty good authority from a source close to the player that there's absolutely nothing in that deal. There's not. Yeah. I wouldn't understand. I know AC Milan have had some financial difficulties in the past, but to spend €8 million on a player that's only got 6 months left on his deal would be madness. I think that would be madness to spend that on a player. If Matt O'Reilly had only 6 months left on his deal, to be spending that when they know that they can get him in the summer. If there is interest, then I think it would be through the means of a free transfer in the summer, because his deal is up in the summer. But I have it on good authority that there's absolutely nothing in that deal. Unfortunately, maybe for David Turnbull in terms of getting a move to Milan.
I think it's been lazy journalism. Somebody's seen the success of Lewis Ferguson at Bologna, and there's quotes from some scout in Italy, but I think it's just he's maybe jumped on a radio show or something like that. There doesn't seem to be much in it, and I think I'd like to see it happen, but I think it'd be madness for somebody to pay that kind of money for David Turnbull at this moment in time. So no, it's just a crazy headline.
I'm quite interested to see, and this is just a point away from Celtic for a minute, how much that Lewis Ferguson will go, because it seems that he's getting touted for a big move in January to Juventus. Juventus have been watching the player. I believe he did score against them earlier on this season or late last season. I can't remember exactly, but I know that for Bologna, he did score against Juventus. I think it was even at the Juventus Stadium. So it'll be interesting to see a player, what his valuation is, and maybe that could be something that David Turnbull looks at, even if it isn't to AC Milan. He could look at an Italian club. This Italian avenue that seems to be happening for players. It happened for Aaron Hickey. It's happened maybe to a lesser extent for Liam Henderson, although he's carved out a good career for himself over there. There's some other examples as well. Josh Doig as well, who's been touted for a move elsewhere. It's definitely an avenue for players, and for Turnbull, that could be an avenue that he looks at it going to. I don't think it'll be AC Milan. I think that's too big a step up for him, but maybe a lesser club in Serie A, he could definitely do a job, because the tempo would suit him to a T.
I think so. I think David Turnbull's profile could be an attractive option for a side in Italy. He's very similar to Lewis Ferguson in many ways, and I think folk maybe see the attitudes of guys like Ferguson and Henderson that you mentioned, Doig, Hickey, they've all been a success, and maybe there's an option there. I just think sadly it's not working out at Celtic for David Turnbull. If the manager really trusted him, there was a good opportunity to start him there during the week. Bernardo was a maybe, Thiago Holm was a maybe. He knows David Turnbull and exactly what he's got to offer, and decided against it. And I think he will look to move away, and maybe he sees his Scotland teammate Lewis Ferguson making a good go at life out in Italy, and maybe he's attracted to something by that. I'd be amazed, as I say, if it's 8 million to Milan, but there's maybe something of that nature on the cards for him.
Yeah, there was a point that I was going to make regarding David. Yeah, so David Turnbull got brought on after Celtic went 2-0 down, effectively, and they use this term in basketball, and I've used it a couple of times, but it's garbage minutes. It's garbage time. It's the minutes that you use when a game is over, and you just put the second string team out to safeguard injuries for other players. That seems to be what David Turnbull got. Now, that's Celtic's top goal scorer this season in the Scottish Premiership. He's joint top with James Tavernier at the top of the SPFL scoring charts, which shows you, maybe he just isn't trusted to do a job in Europe. Maybe that is his limitations. If I was David Turnbull, and that's just me taking off my Celtic hat for a second, you're going to be looking for pastures now in January, aren't you? If you get a good, either that or look for a good deal, speak to clubs in January, because quite clearly he's not getting fancied to be a first team pick for the club on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I mean, Rio Hatate got injured 5 minutes into Champions League match day 3, and that should have been, cruel as it is for Hatate, that's how football works, and it presents an opportunity for whoever's waiting in the wings. And for David Turnbull, particularly a guy who'd started the season in place of Hatate, the opening game against Ross County and then up to Pittodrie, he gets the start. you'd think he'd have been a shoo-in, and he clearly isn't. And that just comes down to, it always comes down to who the manager trusts in football, Celtic and otherwise. And it's actually clear that the manager doesn't know who he can trust in his midfield. He's got Callum McGregor, he's got Matt O'Reilly. He does not know who his third man is. Turnbull's not been the man. Bernardo's shown glimpses. Thiago Holm doesn't seem ready yet. Quan's out the picture. Awata's out the picture. So at the moment, there's nobody that Brendan Rodgers can hang his hat on. And sadly, that tells the story for where we're at with David Turnbull at this moment in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we finish off and we announce who the competition winner is, do you think there's anything else that we've not discussed that you want to talk about with regard to Celtic? Because we've spoke about the recruitment, we've spoke about the game at the weekend against St Johnstone. Tony and I will cover that game or preview the game in more detail, both on Friday and on Sunday, with the pre-match reaction and then the post-match as well, covering the game. Do you think there's anything else that we need to talk about that we've not spoke about with regard to Celtic? Is there any glaring omissions, would you say?
It'd be nice to use your platform to discuss Todd Cantwell's outrageous dive at the weekend, but don't want to spend too much time on that. That boy is an imposter, and he's getting found out slowly but surely. But that's just a personal thing. Just wanted to get that off my chest. From a Celtic point of view, I think the ongoing Green Brigade impasse between them and the club, there needs to be a solution one way or another. I'd like to think apparently there was a meeting that took place last week, and I don't know what was discussed, but I think the powers that be need to get around the table and find a solution, because as a fan base, you are far weaker divided than you are united. That's just basics, isn't it? And I think at the moment there is this division. It's causing divisions online with different fans and stuff. I think the Green Brigade do loads of good stuff, loads of stuff that isn't for me. If they can find a solution to the problems and the reasons why they're banned, can they get around the table and find a way forward? Because at the moment, I don't want to say it's directly having an impact on what's happening in the park. There's no doubt things have been flat though at Celtic Park, because as a fan base, we're just not used to starting the songs ourselves. That's the bottom line. For 16 odd years, the Green Brigade have led from the front in terms of starting the chants and creating atmosphere. And all of a sudden, over the last few home games, fans have went, all right, they're not here. How does this go then? Do we start singing? It's just a wee bit unusual at this moment in time. So I'd like to think and hope that there's a solution there, in some way, shape or form, because it's dragging on and it's not getting us anywhere. So yeah, I think that's clearly it's something that we could spend a whole other show discussing, Ryan. Yeah. But I think it's something that continues to rumble on in the background, and it's just not a great look at all.
It's an unneeded circus and sideshow that Celtic just do not need at this point in time. So hopefully the adults in the room can both sit down on both sides and get that sorted for the good of the good of the atmosphere, especially at home. Away games as well, but especially at home. Hopefully it can get resolved one way or the other, and they can get back. There was a good display at the weekend against Motherwell. There was more of an atmosphere outside the ground than in it, in all honesty, with regard to the meeting the team bus before the game. So yeah, you're hoping that they can bring that atmosphere that was outside the ground back in. Obviously, everybody shakes hands and makes up, basically, and everybody's on the same boat for the run-in of the season, because they'll be needed. I think especially look at that game coming up against Rangers on the 30th. It's going to be a massive, massive occasion, and you need everybody singing from the same hymn sheet in that regard.
Yeah, I think we spoke before the Motherwell game. So the Motherwell game was the first of 10 games in 35 days that Celtic were facing between now and the turn of the year. We've now played 2, so we've got 8 to go, 7 of which are league games, and one's that dead rubber now against Feyenoord. 7 league games can have a huge impact on where the trophy ends up at the end of the season. Celtic are obviously in the driving seat, and it's so important first and foremost that we don't drop any more points in the next 6 games before we face Rangers on the 30th of December. There is a chance you could increase the lead. Rangers are a bit up and down, and we'll see how they go. But from Celtic's point of view, focus on your own job, get the business done in those games. And I think of the 7 games remaining, 4 are at home and 3 are away. So the home crowd's got a huge part to play there. And you just want to give yourself every advantage. And a vibrant Celtic Park and a vibrant, fan base is a huge plus that we've got. A huge asset at Celtic, and I think we need to be making the most of that. It'll be so important on the 30th, but you've got some important games leading up to that as well, and and let's hope everyone can get back together and get us back on track.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much to everybody that joined us in the comments section. As we said before, we had 2 tickets available for an evening with Neil Lennon at Ornmore, and I'm delighted to say that Liz Miller is the winner of the ticket. If Liz could please message the Facebook group, then you'll be able to claim your 2 tickets for Tuesday night. So congratulations to Liz for winning those 2 tickets, and we hope that you enjoy on Tuesday. Just message the Facebook group, give them a direct message, and they'll be able to sort you out with those 2 tickets. So well done for winning that competition. Before we finish off, I just need to go through the sponsorships. This video, as always, was sponsored by MPH Group and Navien Boilers. When you opt for a Navien boiler installation through MPH Boilers, not only are you choosing top tier efficiency, you're also getting a free Navien Internet Controller. It can crank up your boiler's efficiency to an impressive 98%, and they're covering the first year's service at no added costs. A big shout out to MPH as they're nominated for Small Company of the Year at the same awards. Excellence recognises excellence, and they even offer flexible finance options. So gear up for the chill and consider making a smart move with MPH and Navien. For all your plumbing, heating, kitchens and bathroom work, look no further than MPH Group, and all the links are in the description of this video. And once again, before I get back to Tino at the end of the video, if you could please have a look at the Celtic Way in the middle of the screen and the bottom of the screen. For only £12, you can get 12 months coverage of Celtic and Celtic-based journalism at www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. On there, there's analysis pieces from Alan, opinion pieces from myself and Tony, stats bomb reports from myself, scouting pieces from Stuart Ross. Anything that you're looking for with regard to Celtic-based content, look no further than the Celtic Way at www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. And we thank everybody for getting involved. That is available until tomorrow evening, so please get involved at the link at www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Tino, thank you very much for joining me. If anybody wants to hear more about what you have to say with regard to Celtic and the Celtic Exchange in general, where can they find you?
Yeah, so generally speaking, you'll find the podcast in all the usual podcast places, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. But for everything we do, you'll get us at the CelticExchange.com. So you'll see links to all the podcasts, various videos, various blog articles. So yep, the CelticExchange.com, the best place to go. And also, well done to Liz on winning the tickets. Should be a decent night. I'm going to try and get along to see Lenny and Graham Spears, and I'm sure there'll be some interesting stories. The Q&A might be the most interesting part for that one. So well done to Liz.
Everybody goes to the Q&A at the end, don't they?
Yeah,
get a question ready.
Should be a good night.
Yeah, no, hopefully Liz enjoys her night. Please just, if you haven't seen it already, please message the Facebook account or DM the Facebook account, the Celtic Way, and we'll get you sorted with those tickets. And congratulations to her again. Thank you, Tino, once again for joining me. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully it's a better result at the weekend for Celtic against St Johnstone. Thank you, everybody in the comment section, for getting involved. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow to discuss everything with Celtic. Tony will be back with myself to discuss everything to do with Celtic. Until then, have a very good day, and yeah, we will see you tomorrow. Cheers, guys.